The cloud.
Are you gonna make me the co-host?
Yes, I am. Thank you for reminding me. And I don't know why this picture here. Anyway, we'll figure it out. All right. So we welcome everyone here. Like I said, right, you are here for the Are You Ready to Respond in a Crisis? Once again, I thank Ryan for joining us here. We have Felicia Jackson. She'll be joining us when we get to the part about emergency kits. Those of us here in Chattanooga, we know all about Felicia and what she's done, but I want other people to know about this great, amazing thing that she's done, and we'll share that with you. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Before I introduce our special guest in full, I want you guys to take a minute, get out a pencil, paper. We're going to play, it's going to be a little icebreaker here. Is I want you to imagine that you have just been notified you are going on a 10-day vacation to a warm and sunny location of your choice. Okay, whether the Bahamas, Jamaica, Hawaii, wherever you want to go. It's going to be nice and warm. You got this notification. And I'm going to give you 60 seconds to list the top 10 things that you will bring on this vacation. It's sunny. Let's say you're on an island, nice sunny island, and you're going to be there for 10 days. What are the top 10 things you will pack for this trip? I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Let me get my timer started here. 1 minute. All right, go. Top 10. Nice sunny island. What you bringing? All righty. Your 1 minute is up. So guys, list out, tell me some things that you would bring on this trip. You can put them in the chat. You can just unmute yourself. Tell me what you're going to bring on this trip.
Identification.
Okay. Anybody
Some
else?
money.
Okay.
Credit and debit card.
Okay.
Sunscreen.
There you go.
Hat and some sunscreen.
Okay.
Sunglasses
Okay.
and aloe vera gel because I'll burn even with sunscreen.
Everybody's bringing sunscreen. What are you wearing? What kind of clothes y'all packing? Miss Charlene, let me see if I can unmute you. For some reason, Miss Charlene, I can't unmute you, so you may have to just write your stuff in your chat. My unmute is not working for you. What are you guys wearing?
Well, like a round trip ticket, some way to get home.
Okay, look, no, you're just packing for the trip. We don't pack this thing. Top 10 things that you would pack for this trip. Yeah. Okay, what do you guys? Are you going naked? I know it's sunny. Are you guys going naked?
Bathing
suit.
Hat.
Extra bathing suits.
A hat.
Now in the chat, Laura, someone, let me see. Let me do the chat, because in the chat someone did say water, bathing suit, sneakers, toiletries, phone charger, money, clothes,
Okay.
linen dresses, not the regular dresses, but the linen ones.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Now I want you to imagine you're all packed, you're on this plane, you're getting ready to go, you got all your sunny summer stuff packed, you got your toiletries, your sunscreen, y'all got money and all this stuff. But oops, there's been an emergency and the pilot has to divert. And now you're ending up on some remote place in Greenland, or let's say Iceland. No, Iceland is warm, isn't Iceland? Let's say Greenland. I think
They
that's the
both
one that's
cold.
ice. And so now you have all this stuff packed for this warm Bahama vacation. What do you do now?
Stay at the airport.
There
Buy
you
a
go.
coat at the airport.
Ask for blankets on the plane to take with me.
Okay, okay. And once again, and I did this, like I said, it's just for fun. But what I did this just to kind of get us into the idea that sometimes what is the best laid plans of mice and man oftentimes do go awry, something of that nature. And so you can be thinking that life is going along just great, and boom, it changes, and you realize, man, you are not prepared for this particular change. Now, it's probably not likely that we will ever pack for a Bahama vacation and end up in Alaska, but there is a chance that we can be planning for a nice, uneventful day, and boom, things happen, and you want to be prepared for those type of things. And so this is part of what we're going to be discussing today. And just to give you a little background on how this came up for me, is that probably about sometime last year on Dr. Miranda's page, she had posted something about, making your home a Goshen, and then went into, what that means. And then probably last month, I did a teaching at church about, what it means to be Goshen, in the midst of all the chaos of the world. And it was basically about, the people in Goshen, they were separated, but is because Joseph had understood the signs of the times and what was happening, and he prepared Egypt for the coming famine. And so the reason why Egypt wasn't impacted in that particular case, and then his family in Goshen, was because somebody had a plan. Joseph had a pre-plan of 7 years, and so everything turned out right. And so that was the crux of the message. And so I just got to thinking about all the different things that, are happening in the world, happening in our different states and cities, and the potential for things to happen. For some of us, we're going into hurricane season. Depending on where you are, you might have tornado season, you might have blizzard season. If you're overseas somewhere, you got, typhoons, tsunamis, all different types of things. And then you have man-made emergencies, man-made things that happen. I think about, in the times, that we're in, and I don't want to get political in this, but we have the election coming up, and there's so much stuff going on. And for those of you who are watching just the recent news, even with what's happening, in is it DC or New York with President Trump, he was found guilty. And so, there's going to be, an uproar about that. And prayerfully, it's peaceful, but you just never know, because you would think, oh, that would never happen in the United States. But the things that we said would never happen, of course, have happened. And so we would just want to address those things. So with no further ado, I am going to, let Ryan introduce himself, because I didn't get a bio on you, Ryan, but I
My
do
bad.
here for those of you who saw the picture that I had of Ryan. And so Ryan, you didn't send me a picture, so I stalked your Facebook page. and the picture that I just absolutely love, Ryan, I'm going to show you. Let's see if it pops up. I absolutely love this picture of you, Ryan, because to me, it just embodies, you're just a guy who loves his dog and you got chickens.
I do have some
It
chickens,
spoke,
yeah.
I mean, it just spoke so much to what I know about you. You're just a down home, um, honest, simple guy who's raising his family, loving his family, his dog, and his chickens. And so, and then we have Miss Felicia Jackson, and I'm going to introduce her more fully later, but I'm going to stop my share here. But so before we begin, Ryan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you a heads up on just my background. So I did most of I was a military brat growing up too. So my dad was in the Air Force. I was born in Athens, Greece, and moved to Utah when I was little. My dad homesteaded, as they say, in the Air Force and spent a good chunk of his career just in Utah. But my folks split up when I was young, and my mom moved to California. And so I did most of my formative years in Northern California. I went to college in Central Texas. And I got a degree in information systems management at Baylor University. And then the Air Force, having paid for that through an RTC scholarship, I owed some time. And I was commissioned in the Air Force. Did my training as an air battle manager in Panama City, Florida. And then, of all the places in the world the Air Force could send me, they sent me back to Utah. And after 4 deployments in 4 years to the Middle East at the crazy times, my first deployment was when September 11th happened, and then the 3 following deployments were in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, so Kuwait and then Iraq. Wild, crazy times, but my wife and I decided that wasn't for us for the long term. Being gone so much. I mean, the deployments were crazy, and it didn't look like there was any end in sight to all of that. We wanted to settle in a little bit more. So, as Laura mentioned to some before we got on the call, I took a position at the church that we were attending at the time, leading worship, and spent 3 years on staff, leading worship and running the kind of the administrative side of things, and as well as a ministry called Helping Hands, which was just helping folks that were down and out, largely economically. Through that process, we got introduced to a lot of the state services for foster parenting, and we decided that we wanted to be foster parents. And not very many years later, we have adopted 6 kids from foster care, and now 7, because we did end up adopting our grandson as well. So my oldest is my daughter's 24, and my youngest is my grandson we have, who's 3. So full house. We also decided to go multi-generational, and my wife's parents sold their house. We sold our house. We combined all that equity, bought a bigger house, and at one point had 10 folks under this roof. So as a single provider for all of those, felt the weight of making sure that our needs were met, including I didn't grow up with this kind of prepper mentality, but I think it was I was thinking about this. When did this start for me? And I think it was Hurricane Katrina. Watching that happen, go down, everybody's eyes that weren't there were glued to the TV, and it just really dawned on me that we're all vulnerable. No matter where we are, there's some vulnerability, and nature is unpredictable, and we think we've got it squared away. We don't. All we can do is mitigate risk as best we can. So I've been working for 15 years now for defense contractor L3 Harris. I'm a senior manager in the project management office. So I don't do this for a living, but project management kind of relates in some ways. But that's about the sum of me.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. And like some of that I didn't know. I did know about that beautiful family of yours, and I've watched them grow up over the years, saw the grandbaby come in, and you'll see you and Ollie going hiking, and he
Yeah,
is such an adorable little boy with those glasses, and I
he's
just
my
want to
joy.
hug him.
Yeah, I
I
do all
just
the
want to
time.
hug him. As a matter of fact, we're going to be your way in July, so maybe I'll get a chance just to hug Ollie for a little bit.
That'd be
He's just
fantastic.
so adorable. He is. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I got a list of questions that I have for Ryan. You guys are more than welcome to put your questions in the chat if you have any, and we will have a time for Q&A. So definitely be taking your notes of, gee, I want to circle back and ask Ryan this. So, Ryan, if you don't mind, and once again, if it's, you don't have to share it too much, but, what is your family's current disaster emergency preparedness plan? And what should plans entail, like evacuation plans for our pets, or what about college students who are away?
Yeah, so a lot of times, folks, I'll tell you some of my background on learning this too. I'm one of those YouTube learners, right? I find good quality content on there, people that really are truly experts in this because they've been studying it for years. So maybe for the last 10 years or so, I've had a hobby interest in looking into how to be more ready, and what are the pros and the cons, what are the things you got to take into consideration. And so, the extent of my experiential expertise is, we had a really bad windstorm and we lost power for a couple of days, and that was it, right? So I'll tell you a lot of what I've learned through the years and taking into consideration the things that I'm taking into consideration. One of the things that people think preparedness is how do I bug out, right? What do I need to do? What's my bug out bag look like? And they kind of orient themselves in that way. How do I get up and head to the hills if you've got some hills? I've got plenty of hills here. But in all likelihood, you're not going to be leaving. Most of the disasters that will occur, or incidents will occur, you really kind of want to hunker down in your home. That's probably the safest place for you. Unless, as a situationally dependent, if you're on the coast and the hurricane's coming and they're telling you, hey, get on out of the way, as would have been good in that Katrina situation if more people could have, gotten out of the situation, then you want to bug out. But for the most part, my disaster preparedness has been about making sure that my household is squared away when it comes to water, food, heat, electricity, and medicines for a duration of time. And it really started out with, I just want to be ready for 1 week. What if for 1 week I don't have water, food, or the ability to get food, and the electricity's out and the gas lines are out? And I would say number one thing to consider is water. And I really want to emphasize this from this perspective. And I think this is kind of a foundational perspective when you think about disaster preparedness. I have all kinds of insurance. I've got health insurance. I've got homeowners insurance. My cars are insured. I've got life insurance. I even have short and long-term disability insurance with my work, right? How many of you have water insurance?
I don't even know what that is.
There is no such thing other than you self-insuring to say if it comes to pass that I don't have water coming into my house anymore, what will I drink? So you have to store it. You have to store it or find a way to have access to it. You have to take that upon yourself. I need a car, and I need a car to run well, but I don't need that more than I need to be able to drink water, right? But I've insured my car, but have I thought about having water when I need water? I saw a comment come through, said you have a well. That's awesome. I'm jealous. I want to have a well. You got to do crazy things to get permits to drill wells here. But the general gist of what is a good water storage system is about 1 gallon per person per day. Now, a person's not going to drink a gallon, but that includes sanitation, your ability to wash dishes, etc. So I kind of worked my way up to, I want to have water for a week for everybody in my family. I've got one of these big blue, 180 gallon tanks, and among other things. And I go from thinking in terms of a week to 2 weeks to a month. Whatever risk mitigation that you're most comfortable with, you can draw the line, but start with having enough water for a few days, then a week, and I would recommend a couple of weeks. I remember times when there were some issues, and I think it was when I was living in California, there were earthquakes. The water system was contaminated, and so we'd get these boil orders. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a situation where the government says, hey, don't drink the water, boil it first, right? It's great that you've got water coming in. Do you have the ability to boil water? What if the electricity's out? What if the gas lines are broken? You know, do you have a fireplace that you could boil it in? So coming up with some other system to, once you have the water, to make sure you're able to drink clean water. Having a water filtration system is good. They're not terribly expensive. One of the things that I am really fortunate about is I have an avid love of backpacking. And so these two hobbies of prepping and backpacking, they really overlap, right? I have to go out into the woods and then drink water from a stream that, you know, a cow may have been upstream in, and I need to make sure I'm drinking clean water. So water filtration, they have these little UV light pens that you can fill up an Nalgene water bottle with, and you put that in there for 1 minute, stir it around, and it'll kill whatever bug is in there. I got those as Christmas gifts for some of my family members. Like, I want you to have this. Whether if you never use it, fantastic, but I want you to have this just in case you're in a situation where you need to drink clean, safe water. The city's not able to provide it for whatever reason, and you're having trouble with boiling. So. Oh goodness, I could just go on and on. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is food, right? You don't have food insurance, you got to self-insure with food. If you have a freezer, that's wonderful. Frozen food can stay frozen for a long time. Now, what if your electricity goes out? How long does that stay frozen? So I really strongly recommend folks get some alternate source for storing their food, having redundant systems. I love having freeze-dried food. Again, there's an overlap with backpacking. Freeze-dried food will last 25 years, and it tastes pretty dang good. All you got to do is add hot water to it, and you know it comes right on back to life. And the nutritional value, very little nutritional value is lost in the freeze-drying process, but it's very expensive. So I have some freeze-dried food. I've got a big stocked freezer. I've got a generator, and when my power went out for a couple of days, turn on the generator. I've got plenty of fuel storage as well for that. And when the power goes out, my priorities are getting my refrigerator and my freezer up and running with electricity and communications, right? If you got no power, that cell phone isn't going to last for days on end. So how are you going to charge it? There's all kinds of ways to acquire electricity. You can little hand pump generators. You can do solar generators if the sun is shining. But how, you have to solve that question for yourself. How are you going to do that? And that looks different whether you're in an apartment, maybe you have a house, your living situation. You can't run a generator inside. So, are you able to run a generator outside? So just thinking through and solving, how am I going to get food? Or how am I going to get water? How am I going to make sure I have water on hand? How am I going to make sure it's sanitary and good for drinking? Because things can go wrong there. How am I going to get food? And how am I going to get the energy I need for doing the sanitation sides of things, keeping my staying in communications? And then one of the things that I have to consider, especially out here, is one of my most likely disasters that I'll experience in Utah is a blizzard, right? Just a snowstorm that socks us in, and we're not going anywhere. And if the power goes out, if the gas lines are interrupted, how am I going to heat my house in a blizzard with no access? My household is currently heated through a furnace that's powered by gas, or I've got gas log fireplaces. If I've got no gas, what's my alternative? And for me, that generator still works again really well because I also have like 4 different space heaters. We can put everybody in a room and turn the space heaters on, powered by electricity from the generator. We're going to be warm. We're going to have water to drink. We're going to have food to eat. We're going to have light to see by as well. I can power some lamps with that, and my food will last for a good long time. So
Okay.
there's a
You
quick
mentioned-
overview of like the essential things that I'm thinking about that I want to make sure everybody think about the essentials first.
Yeah. And once again, I think that's, what I heard you say is, even with the generator, you need to have your priorities of what you want to put on the generator, especially if, like, one of our neighbors behind us, he has like a built-in generator where, kind of automatically kicks in. But, for, others who have the kind where it's going to need the fuel, like I said, it's not going to run forever. So, that's something that we all need to think about if we have generators. You don't want to, you're not trying to power up the whole house, but, what are your priorities? And, definitely whether you have medical issues, those things are, going to be a necessity for those who need some kind of the medical equipments to be powered up. And you mentioned something about a solar generator. I've never heard of a solar generator.
So it basically just means solar panels.
Okay.
I do have solar panels on my house. You can just buy a single solar panel that will power up a battery bank or whatever. Backpackers have little tiny ones that fold up, and you can make sure that your cell phone gets charged. So a lot of different solar options there. You can even get little sailors use these ones quite a bit, just wind generators that will just take out an electric charge for you and let you largely you want to be looking at charging batteries at that point, right?
Yeah, definitely. And like, for me, we were out of power for an extremely long time. My cochlear implants, the batteries have to be recharged, and they're usually a plug them up to recharge them. So that's
Mhm.
always a concern of mine. Like, oh my God, what if we don't have power for a long time? How am I going to be able to hear? So I had to invest in some portable little battery packs where you just use regular the button batteries and things like that. Because I'm thinking, I would hate to be without my ears for an extended period of time. So, depending on who you are and where you are and your needs, you need to start, kind of forward thinking on those things.
Put this
What is
by
that?
my face. So I'm showing you, this is what they call an Anker battery pack. And I've got about 4 of these, and each one of these will charge a cell phone completely, I think about 8 times. And I use these for backpacking. So I recommend keeping those on hand. They're really easy to charge up. If you keep them charged, then suddenly you're out. You just don't have to worry about your cell phone for 4 to 5 days. If you have multiples of those, you can end up, being good to go for weeks.
Okay. So here's another question. I know when you're talking about as far as, the bugging out, as far as that's when you leave, you have to leave. And then there's a term I read called bugging in, and that's where you're staying. And so you've, addressed a lot of the bugging in type
Mhm.
issues. But, for those people who have to bug out, which means, okay, you have to leave, what are some, I guess some of the different considerations that I thought of, like what for those who have pets. I don't know how many are pet owners here, but a
Yeah.
lot of people don't want to, leave their pets behind. So, what kind of pet evacuation plan should a person be thinking about?
Yeah, so this was actually an issue I've thought a lot about just because it affected my mom. When she lived in Northern California, you've all heard about the Northern California wildfires. 5 of my good friends lost their homes in those fires. My mom, it was 2 blocks away from her house. So she did have to bug out, and fortunately, she had an RV. Um, so that it was very fortunate. If you can spend a lot of money and be really prepared, or again, cross pollinating as it were your hobbies, that works out really well. But if you're going to go somewhere, having and publishing a plan ahead of time is really important. If just it's largely about, well, so I'm surrounded by family, and we're looking out for each other, right? And so if we needed to bug out, we know that we're going to go to such and such a place. If we're heading for the hills, there's a campground that we would head towards. Um, so having that plan, publishing that plan, putting everybody on the same page, and getting there together is important. For that purpose as well, if you're going to a place with a water source that you can filter, that makes it a lot easier not to have to carry your water with you. But you need to be ready to carry water if your bug out plan includes going to a place where it may not be available, the food, etc. The medicines is something I haven't really had to think too much about, and This is actually a real concern for folks, because a lot of times your prescription medicines, you only get them for so long. You have to renew them every month. Now, if we're in a major disaster where you can't store up those medicines, you're gonna have to scramble to get them. Now, if you're scrambling to get medicines and that's the only thing you're scrambling to get, you're in a better spot than most people, right? A friend of mine was talking about his son has major respiratory issues, and he's just kind of throwing his arms up about the preparedness things I was talking about. He's like, I got to focus on my son's medical stuff. Like, yes, you do. Yes, you will in that situation. And won't it be nice if you don't have to focus on food, water, electricity, and heat, because that's all squared away? I don't have great advice for you on how to scramble and advocate for yourself or your loved ones when it comes to getting medicines that you just don't have ready access to. But if the pharmacies are still operating, if the government's showing up with field hospitals, you want to just be able to focus on getting there and getting what you need and making sure that everything else is squared away. I know that I've followed some YouTube sailing channels, and so these people that sail around the world, they are able to convince their doctors, based on their plans, to give them some amount of advanced medicines, and that's been authorized to do, right? If you're out there in the middle of the ocean, you're definitely fending for yourself out there. So it may be something to have a conversation with your doctor about, if you need a stock of prescriptions, if that's possible. I'm not sure. I'm very fortunate it's not something I've had to consider. When you talked about pets, yes. So my mom did have to take her dogs with her as she bugged out. Unfortunately, she had that RV to keep them in, and they could just head south as far as they needed to go until they found a campground that was able to take them. In her situation too, I think initially they went to a large Costco parking lot that was filling up with similar folks doing the same thing. Just, we're out of our neighborhood and the fire, and we're away from the fire. Now let's just sit here for a second and figure out where do we go from here. In her case, she didn't have a real plan, but she had that, okay, I've got a reprieve, I've got a breather, and now I can consider what is the next step. Yeah, considering the threat that may be coming to your area, right? If you're on the coast and it's hurricane season and you're told to evacuate, you don't want to have an evacuation plan that takes you to the next town over. You need to have an evacuation plan that may take you 3, 4, 5 hours away inland to really get out of that storm. So, can't stress enough, consider the threat that you're planning for, and make a plan that makes sense. Really think through it. And this is where the project manager in me comes around. It's like, what could go wrong? Do your risk mitigation. What could go wrong with every part of your plan, and at least think through 2 steps beyond what might you do if that risk is realized. What are the contingency plans that may need to come into place? If I'm heading to Memphis, I know a lot of you guys are in Tennessee. If Chattanooga's got the problem and I'm heading to Memphis, but Memphis has got the problem too, maybe I go up to Lexington instead.
Okay. So now, with that, I'm trying to go through, because some of these questions you're already answering. So once you get your plan, do you and your family like practice or like go over, okay, this in case somebody forgets that this is the plan, this is what we'll do when, how often do you all do that?
Yeah, I would say it would be good to do it more often. If you've got it kind of, if you have it written, that's even better. Everybody kind of has a written plan, then you don't have to remember off the top of your head. Kind of publish a plan. One of the things, because I've got family that's a mile away from me, we're kind of in a triangle. My sister lives here, my dad lives there. We're this mutual support group. One of the things that we've done is we've all got the walkie-talkies, right? The handheld radios that that are powerful enough to reach a mile away. Well, we all know that if something happens and the cell phone lines are down and or the cell phone lines are jammed up and we can't talk to each other, or if the landlines go out, we know what channel we're going to go to do that coordination. That's just something we figured out, and it works for us because we're relatively close. If we didn't have that, we would more than likely need the, am I coming to you? Are you coming to me? Are we going to such and such a location? We expect that we'll be able to communicate real time. So long as I think just we were talking about electromagnetic pulses as a thing to protect against too, and this is an area where I'm weak right now. And I just saw a thing last night that was talking about these solar flares that can effectively act as an EMP, and what a disaster that would be. I was like, all right, I gotta add that to the list of things to think about, because an EMP would disable my my walkie-talkies as well. But I think on an annual basis, just having that conversation, maybe while you're around the Thanksgiving table, just take 5 minutes. Hey guys, remember, if something goes down, we're going to meet at such and such location. And if you don't show up there within a certain amount of time, we're going to come to you. The finer details on what's wise and what's not, just really situationally dependent. But again, I want to encourage you to have those contingency plans. If this breaks, what will we do next? And think about how it could break, and that'll just help you prepare for it.
Yeah, I know in the military, we, then we had the exercise, we had those comms out exercises where, you couldn't go through the phone tree. And so you had to practice if something happens and you can't call the next person on the list, then you had to, the comms out plan. And so
Yeah.
that's where, the walkie-talkies and things come in handy. And since you mentioned, the EMPs, it's called electromagnetic pulses or
Mhm.
something like that. And once again, that's something I didn't really think about until I started, researching about when I think was during the time a couple of weeks ago with the Northern Lights. We could actually see some of them down here in the South, but they were saying, but because of the solar flares, it could disrupt some things. And I'm like, well, that kind of sucks. And so I started researching that, and I'm like, in the day and age that we're in, this is, 20 years ago, you probably would have thought about, EMP, but with the different hostilities coming between the different nations, and you had, what was that, China, or who was that, China that flew that balloon over,
Oh yeah,
and
that was China.
ended up getting halfway across the country before it was shot down. I'm thinking, that could have been so much more worse, because it wouldn't take a whole lot, because we're so dependent on electronics, and it really wouldn't take a whole lot to disrupt our life for a long time. And I read that if something were to happen with the EMP type event, that where electronics and technology is disrupted, it might take months to repair everything. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I don't know if you researched anything, but is there anything that we could do to even prepare or protect things from something like that?
There is. I want to look into this a little bit more, but I know that, again, so much you can learn from sailors that are out there just braving it on their own. Sailors have to worry about lightning strikes, and it has the same sort of effect. I mean, it just fries every electronic that they have, right? But they have these bags that they can put some essential communications in, and then they put those into their oven. So you put your essential electronics and communications into this bag, and it prevents that electrical discharge, and I believe it would also prevent an effect from an EMP as well. And why they put it in their oven, I imagine it's because it's some kind of a grounded device. But I want to look into that a little bit more. But and just encourage you as well. There are some really great resources out there, and it's, for as much as I kind of shake my fist at the digital world and what it's done to our minds, it's also an incredible disseminator of really good and valuable information as well. So it's out there.
And now those bags, are those what I've been reading about, Faraday bags, Faraday
There you go.
cases? Is that
Yes.
what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what they're called, Faraday bags.
Okay.
So, you know, now that we're talking about it, and we're always getting better, right? I have not arrived. I'm still in a process. So now that we're talking about that, I want to look into getting those Faraday bags and getting some for my family as well to make sure that we're at least keeping those walkie-talkies in there, right? I'm not gonna leave my cell phone in there, and I'm not gonna walk around with my cell phone in a Faraday bag either. But
I wonder if they
walkie-talkies
make
make
any
sense.
kind of cell phone cases that might be like a Faraday cell phone cases. Do you know?
I don't know that if there's any inventors on the call, you might have a patentable idea there.
Who knows? Who knows? So I'm going to jump down to a little bit where we're talking about we're talking about emergency, things that you need to have on hand during an emergency. And so I was thinking about, I've seen, these bug out bags, which is, basically, a lot of, just emergency prep type things. And so I'm going to bring in in a few, I'm going to bring in Felicia Jackson because she has a wonderful product that she's created that, definitely, in case of medical emergencies. And I was just thinking that in times of panic, I could see someone who's already compromised being panicked and, like, oh gosh, I'm, having a heart attack because I'm so afraid. And then, you're worrying about all these different things. And I don't know how many of you just kind of raise your hands if someone were to have a cardiac event, whether it's an emergency disaster situation or just, at work, in your car, at home, someone was having a cardiac situation that you are comfortable saying, hey, I know CPR, I can get this thing done. How many of you guys are just confident that you can make that happen? And so I brought that up because I want to introduce Felicia. And let me see if I can bring her up here on the pen. Gallery. Felicia, you still here? Here you go. I'm going to pin you up here.
Okay, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Felicia Jackson. And she is she has a wonderful invention. I'm going to let her tell you about that. But once again, when we're talking about handling emergency situations and something, I truly believe you need to have in a kit in your home, in your car. And I say this because a few weeks ago, I was thought about, what, I already had a couple, but we have 3 levels in our house. And so, like, if I'm down here on the bottom level and something happens, I got to run all the way upstairs to get it. Or if I'm in a car and something happens. So, Felicia, I'm going to give you a chance just to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your product and why it came to be.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, for having me. And let me please excuse my voice, everyone. I'm used to talking, so I must have talked myself, and I'm sick. So if I start cracking up, please forgive me. So my name is Felicia Jackson. I am the inventor and founder of a product called CPR Wrap. I was born and bred here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, lived in East Chattanooga area. Only daughter of 3 boys. So I always thought I was going to be an electrical engineer like they were. But life is amazing that it takes you in a different journey that you think that you were going to be. So, but I'm happy that I'm here now. I've always been in the medical field. My last career prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I worked as a physical therapist assistant. So I always loved taking care of people. I did create a product called CPR Wrap, and I did create that after I almost lost my baby. It's a story that still affects me today. Every time I talk about it, it's like it just happened the other day. So I have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. And that was around the time they were single digits. My youngest son was 2 years old. And we were driving around in a car. what every person does every day. And, you know, they call me the helicopter mom because I'm always checking on my babies. But this particular time, I look back, check on my baby, and I noticed that he was trying to cry, but nothing was coming out. And I immediately knew that he was choking. You know, I already worked in a hospital. I worked in the emergency room at the time. We were CPR trained and certified every year instead of every 2 years like it is today. And so I screamed to my husband to jump out. We both jump out of the car, run to the car seat, take our baby out of the car. He hands him to me to initiate the back blows. But I completely forgot. I completely forgot everything. And so while I'm searching in my head, you know, what to do, shaking him, oh God, help me, he goes unconscious. Now, if they go from choking to unconscious, you should immediately start performing CPR. I could not remember. I mean, it was like my mind went totally blank. And so my husband saw that I was panicking. He took my baby from my hands and he saved his life. And I was just so distraught with myself. And I'm thinking, what if my husband was not there? Would I have snapped out of it? Because that adrenaline gets to pumping. You know, sometimes it's different when it's not of, right? You know, not a relative. But when it's your own child or someone you're close to, you know, something takes on. I became a mother instead of a medical professional, you know, at that point, you know, because when something happens like that, you either fight, flight, or freeze. And I froze. And from that, I invented CPR Wrap, which is a disposable CPR template that allows anyone to perform CPR. I wanted to make it as simple as possible, and I actually have one with me. And so it actually has everything that you need from start to finish to perform CPR. It has a one-way valve mouth barrier for rescue breathing if you choose to do that. Visual hand placements. So when you place it on top of the victim, align it using the visual cues and put your hands exactly where the image is to start compressions. It tells you in 4 simple steps, the steps of CPR, even tells you to call 911 because you can forget that as well. And so that's, you know, that's been my life journey, is the getting this product out to the masses, you know, because it's all about saving lives.
Thank you, Felicia. What just really struck me is that even if you know CPR, you're trained in CPR, that you can, you know, you can just have a brain freeze in that moment. And so once again, and those come in 3 different sizes, right?
Right. They come in adult, child, and infant sizes. And we even have one coming out for dogs soon. So, I mean, it's all inclusive of the entire family.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm just thinking, you know, once as I started thinking about this, I'm gonna go ahead and unpin you, Felicia. Is that, you know, at any given moment, you know, those types of events can happen. And I just thought about, you know, if I'm in my car and I'm traveling with my 5-year-old granddaughter, you know, she's always eating something back there, you know, whatever. And so, you know, you try to keep an eye on them. But, you know, I wouldn't know if I would be able to save her, to save anybody in my household, or if I was having a cardiac event, would my teenage granddaughters be able to save me? And you know, without the CPR wrap, the definite answer is no. The most they can do is call 911 and panic and cry until help gets there. And most of us know with a cardiac event, you know, time is of the essence. And so I would suggest that if you are doing an emergency preparation kit, and even outside of the kit, I just purchased like a bundle. If you go to her website, Felicia, you know, put your website in the chat there. You know, you can buy you can buy the single items, or you can buy them in bundles where you can get the adult and infant or child, different types of bundles. And I'm thinking, you know, okay, you know, I need one for a child, I need one for an adult, I don't need one for an infant. But what if someone with an infant is over to my house? We always got people over here. So yeah, I need one for an infant. You know, I'm going to need one for my car, I need one for my granddaughter's car, my daughter's car. And so I'm thinking, I mean, these things do I need? And I thought, you know, 1 or 2 is not enough. If I'm up in the bedroom and something happens downstairs. And so I want you guys to, you know, check out her website. I think that everyone should have this, you know, in their homes, in your drawer, in your office. I think you have like a little hook that you can latch it onto your purse, because you never know when a stranger might need your help in a store. How many times have we been somewhere and we've seen the emergency vehicles at a Walmart or something and think, oh, something must have happened. Well, what if it happens around you? Can you save anyone? And so Felicia, Dr. Miranda wants to know, what is the website? I think she's putting it in the chat.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah, the website, and I will put in the chat. It's cprwrap.com, cprwrap.com.
Okay. Before we head back to Ryan, does anyone have any questions for Felicia? Okay. So with that, I thank you, Felicia. I know you're not feeling well, so if you need to hop off, you can do that. If you need to mute your screen, you can do that. But I do thank you for coming to share, because I think this is a pretty innovative and practical life-saving device, whether you're in a disaster situation or just an emergency situation. And as I got to thinking about all the different things that could happen, I realized that the two that we had in the house was just not enough. And so I went to the website and, made sure to, get that bundle, because I want to be prepared. And like I said, I thought about, what if I'm having an event, who's going to save me? So I need to let my family know, hey, these are located here, here, and here. So I recommend that for anyone. So thank you, Felicia. Thank you, Felicia.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
So I'm going to come back to you, Ryan. Let me pin you here and then pin myself here. So Ryan, as we were continuing to talk about different types of disaster preparedness type things, what are some resources? I think, talked about it a little bit, and you mentioned earlier about this 180-gallon water container. Where do you even get something like that from?
Oh, yes. Emergencypreparedness.com is the website. Somebody plug that in for me. Gosh, am I double check this? So there are obviously, if there's a buck to be made, somebody's going to provide a product, right? So prepping is becoming more and more popular, and that's a good thing. So the products are out there, right? So people will sell you those freeze-dried foods. They'll sell you the water filters. They'll sell you the water storage, right? I think it's great if everybody could get 180 gallons of water stored up, all at once. That comes with it. I mean, I've had this same water, as you might imagine. Like, you really put water in one tank for 5 years, and you expect that to be good. There's some like liquid nickel or something like that. Anyway, there's a little bit of chemical additive that you put in there to keep that, preps it just for water storage. If you've ever tried to store fuel as well, there's fuel additives. I've got 40 gallons of gasoline in my garage, and I try to rotate it out and just dump some in my car and then go fill it up every 6 months or so. But if you want to store fuel for long term, you want to put some kind of fuel stabilizer in there. So I don't have all the answers precisely, just giving you additional things to consider, regardless of what you're trying to store. Make sure that it stores well, and then you take other precautions around that end. As a for instance, like rice will keep for a really long time, but not forever, and it will deteriorate in quality as does flour as well. But if you get some kind of a Mylar bag and you kind of vacuum seal it in there, and you add some deoxidizers, and these disaster preparedness websites will sell you the Mylar bags, and they'll sell you the deoxidizer stuff, and they'll sell you a sealer. You just want to make sure that you're prepping it and understand how long will that last, and write a date on there. And then the thing about storing food, you can always use it, right? I mean, if I've got freeze-dried food that will last for 25 years, I'm also planning to hike the Pacific Crest Trail when I retire. I was like, I'll use that then. If I haven't used it by now, it'll be about the time that it's going to expire since I bought it. And so, yeah, that'll be great for, again, that crossover of hiking. I'll have freeze dried food for my backpacking trip at that time. But don't waste. It doesn't have to go to waste. Is my point there. You can always use it, and if you have a reasonable, you could go to the nth degree, and people do with their rotating of their stored goods and spreadsheets, this, that, and the other. Start small. Just start small. Get a few gallons of extra water. Get a couple of pallets, not pallets, of cases of canned goods, even some dried goods, and start building there. But you get those a case of canned goods, and make sure you mark them when it's going to go out of best if used by, right? And use it up. So it's really just it's an investment in something that you'll ultimately use. You're just spending a little sooner than you otherwise normally would have.
So now when you said the Mylar bags and the sealers, is that the same thing? Like, because I have something on my counter where it has like the plastic storage bags and you put everything in and then you vacuum the air out and you seal it. Is that the same thing?
So Mylar is a little bit more of a heavy duty. I mean, if you feel that, like, they make balloons out of Mylar, right? It's kind of metallic, right? So it really is heavy duty, and it will be much more likely to ensure that oxygen doesn't get in there. Oxygen is the enemy of long-term storage.
Okay. The Mylar bags and deoxidizers. I think that's what you said, deoxidizers. Did I
Yeah.
get that right?
Now I'm double checking myself.
Okay. And so now while you're checking that, Ryan had mentioned about starting small. And, I know some people, financially, you may not be able to, have a whole, 180 gallon tanks of this, and that. And so, you may want to think about, I think Ryan, I had sent him a message like, as far as, not knowing everyone, here's economic situation, and might get discouraged because, oh my gosh, and I can't afford this, I can't afford that. Do you have any suggestions, Ryan? Like, I think I talked like a 30, 60, 90-day plan, like in 30, like the first 30 days after this meeting, these are the things that maybe you should focus on and then continue to add afterwards. You have anything to add on that?
Yeah, you really can start small. Like when and I think I continue to want to encourage you to think about this in terms of like insurance, right? You spend a certain amount of money on insurance every month. Now, what you ought to do, or my strong recommendation is, start thinking about disaster preparedness insurance for yourself and adding that into your budget. It could be as little as $20 a month. And you can make a significant dent in your preparedness status. You can buy quite a few gallons of water for $20, right? So just in the first month, you could think about, I want to have a week's worth of water storage for my household, right? That's a gallon per person per day. If there's 4 of you, then you're talking about 28 gallons of water. Certainly within 2 weeks or a month, you could get individual gallon jugs of water. You could get up to 28 of those. Then start thinking about in terms of food. An average diet of 1,800 to 2,000 calories per person per day. That you'll be really healthy if you're eating 2,000 calories a day. You don't need that much. Some people just get skinnier in disasters, and that's okay. But start thinking about, what have I set aside? And if you just get, you're at the grocery store, you're grocery shopping, you just get one extra flat, what are this, of canned goods. Get some beans this week, get some tuna next week, get some corned beef and hash. I love corned beef and hash that's in the can. It's probably awful, but just each time you go to the grocery store once a week, just get an extra flat of canned goods or some extra pasta that is good high calorie stuff. Now, if you're Costco member, boy, you can get a 50-pound bag of rice at Costco for pretty dang cheap, right? Just to have that on hand. Again, that rice isn't going to last forever, but put into that budget again. Just order a few Mylar bags to store that rice up. Get a few of those oxygen absorbers. I think I called them oxidizers, but oxygen absorbers is what you want to look up. A few Mylar bags, a couple of oxygen absorbers. And I like Mylar bags as well, because if you have any kind of issue with rodents or bugs, it really just helps out quite a bit there. One thing that I did with mine was, somebody brought up that even because I've done this with rice and with flour, even with rice or flour, it could have like little weevil type bugs in there that that would just populate. There's only so much that any seller can do, but you don't want to come after your rice when you need it, or your flour, and find that it's full of bugs that have just had a lot of fun. If you can freeze that bag, put that bag in the freezer for 3 days, whatever might have found its way in there is going to be dead. So freeze the bag for 3 days, and then transfer from that kind of paper bag or what have you into something that's more durable, like Mylar. Put an oxygen absorber in there, and you're going to really on the cheap, right? Because rice is a staple food for across the world for a very good reason. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's pretty high calorie. You can do this also with beans. That's just fundamental survival. Now, you're gonna be happy eating beans for a month alone? Not very, but the alternative is, when the National Guard trucks roll up and they absolutely get swarmed with everybody that's desperate. Disasters bring out the best in humanity and the worst, right? You're going to see people cooperating and sacrificing and heroic things happening, and you're going to see violence on a scale that is unimaginable to civil society. We want to be able to be in a position to, if at least we can't help, we're not a part of the problem. We're not down there trying to get at that National Guard truck to get that sack of flour and rice, because we're squared away. We're good. I don't want to put myself as the sole provider for my family in a position where somebody might injure me because I've got the bag of flour and they don't, and they're trying to take it from me. But I'm also, whoever else needs it can go get it, right? So if I'm not necessarily able to help, at least I'm not part of the problem of folks that haven't prepared properly and get really, really desperate to get what they need.
I think that's a good thing to think about, is that, if you can prepare yourself well enough, you don't have to add to the burden of, the National Guard or things like that, or to put yourself in a position to even have to, deal with things like that. I think we've seen enough, whether it's been movies or even, seeing the things that are happening in other parts of the world when, they're deprived of food and water and their goods, and what happens when, crowds just overtake the suppliers, and it's not, a pretty sight. And it always grieves me when I see children, in those, situations where, they have to be there with their parents to grab that, bag of rice or flour. I'm thinking, gosh, I don't want to have to do that. That's for a self-preservation thing, but then it also, once again, to mitigate the extra burden for National Guard, whoever, that, you're one less person or one less family that they have to deal with. So, definitely that's just a good way to think about it, Ryan. Now, I think, like when you talk about, storing things, I don't know how, big your land is or your house is. Obviously, it's enough space for you to be able to store, these big, gallons and things like that. Um, and so I think, we should think about, start surveying your own land, your own places. And, if you live in an apartment, I don't know if you can store a big 50-pound bag of rice. And so do you have any advice, Ryan, for those who, may be space limited, that, they can't, do the big storage, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. You can be cooperative too. I mean, I know there's church community that are participating in this. There are other groups, if you find folks that you really trust, you can get into a cooperative situation with them. My parents are in the process of downsizing. They're going to really tiny place where they're not allowed to even garden, and in an HOA. Well, they know where to go, right? I'm on an acre, and I've got a very sizable garden, and I've got plenty of place to store here. So get creative in your community when it comes to that. But then also, don't discount, like, a 5-gallon bucket of rice would get you by for a long time, and it doesn't take up that much space. 2 5-gallon buckets. One of beans and one of rice, one of maybe 3 with flour. You can tuck that into your closet, and you want to store it in a cool, dry place anyway. But I guess my point is, you don't need 6 months worth of food storage, which is what I'm kind of ultimately aiming for, and I can do that here. You don't need that to handle most of your problems. 5, 10, or 15-gallon worth of a bucket of a place that you could tuck into a corner closet would make a world of difference if and when it really ends up mattering.
I guess this would be motivation for some of us, and I'm raising my hand, to maybe look at how much closet space that we're actually using for clothes we don't wear, shoes we don't wear, and to look at how that space could be captured for emergency prep. When I think about, those clothes aren't really going to help me a whole lot. And, I have a overabundance. I'm thinking, like, I gotta probably, at least I could probably clean out a whole closet and save a family of 15, probably, who knows. But,
Yeah.
definitely, start surveying your space and surveying places in your home that you may be able to commandeer and, create those spaces. And everything, from what I'm listening to Ryan, everything doesn't have to be in the same spot. You might have some rice upstairs, some beans downstairs, some water here. So, you may not have one big space, but if you can carve out corners and just know where everything is, so, anyone can start this, is what I'm hearing Ryan say, correct?
Couldn't have said it better. Anyone can and should, and you don't have to think. It can absolutely be overwhelming, but don't let it be. Just think about, I want to get water for a week, right? I want to get food for a week, and think through some of the best ways to do that for your situation. I would strongly encourage you to consider, if you're thinking, I don't have the space for this, it's like, it's a priority issue, right? So you've got space for some things. Are these things more important than the potential of not being a problem when it comes to disaster?
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned about gardening, and how I've had a conversation with some other peoples about different types of homesteading skills that will come in handy if we're ever in some kind of prolonged situation. And I know here in America, you don't think about stuff like that, because I think we've gotten so comfortable and relaxed with always having everything, at our arm's reach. But when I watch the news and I see different things going on in different countries, that, I'm not going to say that could never happen to us. We didn't think 9/11 would ever happen, and it did. And so I think we need to get out of that "it could never happen to us" mindset, but get into, well, what if this did happen, this prolonged situation? And so, what are some, and this wasn't one of the questions, I think, but, different homesteading skill, like, say, a garden, maybe look at some place where you can do indoor gardens. I have a son-in-law, he does aquaponic he builds aquaponic tanks where there's just self-contained, you put the water in it. He has some catfish at the bottom of it. The waste from the catfish fertilizes the plants, and the plants feed the catfish, and just it's a really interesting system. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, it wasn't that long ago that in the grand history of the world that almost everybody had what they called a victory garden, and that was during World War II, and supplies were limited, and everybody was encouraged, if you got a little bit of plot of land, make sure you're using it to be productive. And what you can do anymore with the technology that they've come up with, say what you want about GMOs, but the varietals that they've developed over the years and the ability to grow in adverse conditions, it's really, really amazing. There's some incredible YouTube channels about what people are doing with small gardening efforts on just tiny little apartment patios, right? The amount of potatoes you can grow in a 10-gallon bucket on a patio, it's pretty spectacular. You can get 20 pounds of potatoes out of there. So yeah, I think I encourage everybody to at least dabble a little bit with some form of gardening, just so, because we don't need to right now, but if the time comes when you really need to, you want to be somewhat decent at it. So my encouragement is kind of prepare yourself with skills. If there's an emergency, a disaster, sudden, your garden's probably not going to help you too much. I mean, if the weather's just right and you're in the harvest season, great, you got some food out there. It can help, but it can help you with food storage if you're into canning and things like that. And I would love to get into that more. But for that prolonged situation that you're talking about, Laura, where there's breakdown in supply chain, I'm following some folks that are talking about the geopolitical state of the world right now, and that we've been in this. I don't think there's conspiracy theorists either, but do a very good job of explaining how we've been in a global supply chain world. The world has become globalized, and the trend right now is to deglobalize. And so some supply chains will be breaking down. There will likely be some disruptions. In a country as wealthy as America, we're not going to hurt so much for getting or importing what we need. What we'll likely see is that it'll just be much more expensive. But America as a whole is wealthy enough that we're just going to buy what we need, and the people that don't have the money to buy it, they're going to experience famine. In the grand scheme, in the history of the world, we live in an incredibly good time right now, with the technology and the way it is, and the relative peace. Laura, again, you've mentioned that we're seeing wars that we did not expect to see in our generation, right? I did not expect to see near peers, invading one another. But that's where we are, and like it or not, that is within our human nature. And with the demographic issues and the potential for population collapse, with the birth rates being what they are, populations being older and older, there's some real concern. I'm not trying to panic anybody, I'm not, but there is some real concern about what it will look like when the economic systems that we have built up, they really can't handle the demographic collapse that we fully expect to see. And I'm talking about places like Korea, Japan, most of Europe. Their populations are just absolutely plummeting, and it will not be long before more than half of their population is retired and having to be supported by a very tiny population. What was it we were just talking about? I mean, China being one of those. They had the one-child policy for 40 years. One-child policy. Their population is on the verge of shrinking at a level greater than what we saw during the bubonic plagues. right? And it's just because they're just not having kids. That's it. They're not experiencing pestilence and disease that's killing everybody. They just didn't have kids. But that amount of not having kids is shrinking populations in a way that we have no economic system that can explain how this is going to work. We're humans and we're inventive and we'll survive, but it's going to be bumpy along the way. And we could see global supply chains collapse. We could see as countries become desperate that little regional wars fire off. And God, what do we spend on our military? Something like we spend the equivalent amount on our military as the next 10 countries combined. Right? So America is not going to be invaded. That's not going to happen. That's not something that you have to worry about. But that doesn't mean we're going to have the stuff that we've always had in our lifetimes. And it doesn't mean that America also has experienced depression as well. It's been 100 years. We might be due. So I'm not trying to freak anybody out. I just think it's a really good idea to develop some skills and the Victory Garden sort of skills, so that if and when they become necessary, you're not floundering. So little gardens, little potted, you don't need a lot of space to do stuff anymore. They've got these vertical pillar things that can produce berries in a very small space. Epic Gardening is a YouTube channel that I've really enjoyed watching. He's done some pretty cool things in very tiny places. I mean, you've got quarter-acre lots that are producing as much food as anybody would need in their household for a full year. Just incredible stuff. The aquaponics things, really amazing stuff. And gardening's fun too. So.
Okay. So what was I getting? So you talked a little bit about the financial I don't say financial collapse, and maybe we're due or things like that. So when it comes to disaster preparedness or emergency preparedness, do you have any kind of, is there any way where you have prepared in case there, for a possible financial collapse? Is there anything that we can do to, mitigate the impact that it has on, us individually, or is that family, or is that just something like, you just roll with the punches?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do, right? I've heard some preppers talk about, that they think you ought to keep cash in your house hidden away somewhere. Some of them are recommending, $1,000 or up to $10,000 in cash. That makes me nervous. But if there's a run on the banks and they shut them down and you can't have cash, or, again, the EMP stuff we were talking about, if that takes out all the credit card systems, how are we going to exchange our money? How are we going to have access to it? It could be a real issue. Then again, if all hell breaks loose and all that paper that you have is not seen as anything more than paper, it could become about bartering, goods and services back and forth to one another. So what are your skills? What do you have? What can you do with your hands? What stuff to take into consideration? I honestly I'm not spending a whole lot of time, energy, and attention on that. I don't have a whole stash of cash in my household. It's just stuff that I'm toying with and thinking about. I see some wisdom in keeping the cash just in case you can't get to it. How much? Makes me
Yeah,
nervous
I'm
to keep a
thinking,
lot of cash.
yeah, I'm thinking 10,000 might be a bit overkill, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, enough that, maybe you go get a gas, a tank of gas if you need to travel, out somewhere. So, that's definitely something on my list to think about, how much cash do we want to, keep, in the house, uh, and things like that. And you talked about bartering, and we had this conversation in another group with Dr. Miranda, and the things that are, I don't even know if this is a word, but I'm going to say it anyway, barterable. That I was reading somewhere that there are certain items that if you for this is long term emergency situation that some things are more in demand than others. And, one thing that, we joked about, especially for those of us who come from the Christian background, who, don't think, don't drink beer, don't drink wine, don't think any of this, but alcohol, um, as I've been researching, is like the most barterable item that you can have. Different, soldiers who've been in different, war-torn countries saying that is the one thing that if you have, let's say, a bottle of tequila or something, that could go a long way with getting you, medication or things like that. Can you think of, just maybe the top 5 things that we should think about, well, for a barter type situation, that I don't have to drink the tequila, but, maybe I need to have it in the cabinet somewhere in case I need to exchange it for tomatoes or something.
Yeah, I agree that alcohol is a good one because some people are going to want it just for what most people typically want it for. But in an emergency situation too, it's also a cleaning agent. It can be a fuel agent as well. When it comes down to that disaster preparedness situation as well, you got to look at what are people ultimately really going to need. It is that water, food, shelter. If you have an excess, people are going to want that. You can enrich yourself with that if that was what you were about, or you can, create some variety for you in those areas as well. So, if your situation is particularly good at growing those potatoes on a balcony that I talked about, and somebody else is particularly good at growing the tomatoes, well, variety is the spice of life, right? And it's not just about enjoying what you're eating, but it's also about nutrition as well. You do need to get a variety in your diet. So think about it in those terms. What do you have that other people don't have, that then they have what you want in those fundamental essential survival ways? You could barter out the use of your water filtration system or something like that. You don't have to give it to anybody, but just the use of it. Hey, I'll let you use this if you throw some tomatoes my way in a nice way. So think about it in terms of that. If you've got the tools that other people need, and they've got the stuff that you could use as well, nothing's off the table when it comes to that.
Okay. Now, another thing that, like I said, I've been thinking about this is, when it comes to our health, you backpack, you hike, and you're probably a fairly healthy person. That if once again you had to, we had to bug out and go somewhere. I was sharing with my husband, that because I need to do better with managing my health. That I thought about the situation with Lot, and the angels told him to go up, to the mountains, and he was like, basically, nah, can I just stop here? And so, I think for me that was, if something happens, okay, you got to hike up to Signal Mountain or Stone Mountain. I don't think I would make it just because of my health. And so I think it's important, and you can talk about this, that for us to even think about, are we healthy enough to survive a situation? Not so much healthy enough where I don't have any diseases or anything like that, but are you healthy enough to survive a prolonged situation where maybe you do have to, walk a long way or do something like that? I don't know. I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
speak to that. There's nothing that you can really.
there's certain health issues where there's not much you can do other than, again, like, make sure you're not a problem as much as you can be. If you're squared away, then you can focus on your medical issues and needs. Um, if you have to head to the hills, I mean, it's very good to be healthy. It's also good to be healthy for stress management issues. So diet, sleep, exercise, all these things that your doctor is going to tell you are good for you and you ought to do, they are especially applicable in emergency situations. Those are going to be very stressful situations. And if you're unhealthy, that exacerbates the problem, inflammation issues, things like that. So just a general encouragement from me to be as healthy as you can be. There's only so much you can do as you get into your senior years, but it's not nothing, right? So do something. Um, Eat reasonably well, exercise, try to make sure you're getting enough sleep, you know, de-stress, meditate, pray, all that is going to serve you well to have a healthy mindset as long as a physical body. And, for those believers on the page, your body's a temple, right? Take care of it. It's your gift. Take care of it.
Yeah. And I brought that up because I think that, we have to be honest with ourselves. And I had to be honest, with myself when I think I was walking up some steps to go to my granddaughter's performance or something. And we, parked down for some steps. And by the time I got to that top step, I could hear myself breathing. And I'm like, oh, I'm looking around and saying, who's breathing like that? And it was me. So I'm like, okay, this is not good, because if I have to escape or, run from something, I'd be the one to get caught, because I'm going to probably be the last one in the pack. When the crowd, when people are running, they're going to get whoever's last. And that would probably be me at this point.
Yeah.
So I had to be honest with myself. And so I encourage all of you to take, honest stock of, your own health situation. I was sharing with my husband, I'm on BP meds. And I'm thinking, well, what happens if something happens and I can't get to these BP meds? Now I got to be worrying about my BP, which is going to send my blood pressure even higher, because I'm worried about my blood pressure. So I'm like, okay, no, we got to get off the blood pressure medications, because that's the only thing that I'm really, taking. So I'm like, okay, let's lose this weight. Let's start exercising, because I don't want to be in a situation where, I'm dependent on this particular thing. I know some people are on life-saving type medications, where they might, cancer or, dialysis and things like that. So that's totally different than I'm going to say these voluntary. I'm going to use the word voluntary, but just as a sense of, this is something that, your blood pressure is something that you can deal with. You might not be able to deal with, needing a new kidney, but definitely, things like high blood pressure or cholesterol, we can get those in check, because we don't want to be a burden in those situations to ourselves, even to our family members. So,
And I'd say
that's the
too,
motivation.
if through diet and exercise, I know there's a lot you can do. You can't do everything, but if through diet and exercise you come off some medications, good. You won't need those either in a disaster, right? I think, you're gonna live longer and have a higher quality of life and be less of a burden and all of these things. But yeah, save some expense and have one less thing to worry about in those disaster situations.
So I think I'm one last question. I think, when we talk about the geopolitical things that are happening around the world, but even here within our nation, here in the United States, we do have one person here who's from Zambia, who's joining us. And so they probably have a whole other issues that we probably can't even imagine. But when we think about civil type things that have a potential of breaking out, where you say we probably don't have to worry about being invaded by another nation. But,
Yeah.
I think with everything that we see going on within the nation, we probably have more of a chance of civil, unrest, especially with all the, political things that are happening, and, the things that, are being said that, if this happens, then this might happen. And so things like that. So, do you have any, I don't know, any things that are coming across as to you that maybe we should be prepared for, as far as national type things, civil type things?
Yeah, another
Respond to
thing
that.
that
Let me go
go,
ahead. And for me, I think about like safety and security
yeah.
of my person, of my home. um can you speak to that?
Yeah, certainly very important. It's something we haven't touched on yet. I know it's a sensitive thing too. When I advise people, I start going down my list, and ammunition is on my list of things to tell folks to make sure that you're squared away with, because we live under rule of law now, and it's been pretty dang good. We have riots here and there and things like that, but there are situations where rule of law breaks down, and it's the wild, wild west all of a sudden. And it may get established later on, but in the meantime, you're on your own. I mean, at any given time, if somebody were to come to my house right now, and if I were not able to manage the threat in my house right now, and the best thing that I could do is call the Farmington City Police Department to come and help me out, well, 8 to 15 minutes from now, they'll be here, and a lot can go down in 8 to 15 minutes. So I encourage folks to make sure you're squared away to whatever degree you are reasonably comfortable. For me, if I imagine a disaster situation where National Guard trucks are getting mobbed, there may also be situations where folks are going door to door and looking for what they can get, right? When it comes to, civil unrest, I encourage people to stay out of the fray as much as they can. Stay out of the fray. I like security for doors. I like, video, being able to see what's going outside without putting your head outside. I like that. We have that technology now. It's something I would encourage folks to do. Deadbolts on doors, being able to close windows. I'm not a bar your windows kind of person, but close them, lock them, and hide everything that's behind them. Don't let folks be able to see in. So if you need to hunker down and be quiet and like nobody's home, but if you try to bust through this door, you're going to run away quickly unless you really, really are willing to give your life for what's in here. Because I'm not willing to let my kids lose their life to you because you want the stuff that's in my house. I'm here very publicly, and I have very publicly in the past, like, advocated for preparedness, but there's a lot of folks that do this that are very quiet about it because they don't want everybody and their 10 dogs knowing I got a lot of food here, I got a lot of water here, and I've got medical supplies, and because you're the target then, right? It's like, I know where to go, right? So yeah, you may want to, as you're doing this, just be discreet about it as well. I've kind of calculated that risk for myself, and I kind of feel a mission to encourage people to do this, but at the same time, I know it puts a little bit of a target on my back. I'm trusting my social media circles to not come to overwhelm the systems that I've put in place here. But we'll see. I've had people tell me, I know where I'm going in a disaster. I said, well, good luck. You better come with stuff. Like, I'm willing to cooperate with you, but I'm not going to carry you. If the U doesn't work, doesn't eat. That
Yeah.
still applies.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I had mentioned once again in a couple other groups that, as you're doing this is not the time to be posted on Facebook, letting everybody know your plans. And I guess it's almost like a moment of confliction for those of us who, are givers and we want to take care of everyone. It was like, I want people to come and I want to make my place a space where people can come and be safe. But at the same time, I don't want everybody coming. I want to, trying to figure out once again, kind of sit down and plan like, okay, how do we, once again, be who we are as people, but still, use wisdom about it. And I remember a Facebook conversation that you and I had, as probably after a mass shooting or something. And I had asked the question, and I am not anti-gun. I'll go ahead and tell you that now. But I had asked the question about, why would anybody need like multiple, weapons or, automatic, weapons, in their
Yeah,
home.
semi-automatic
And I was like,
rifle.
okay,
Yeah.
explain to me. And, you came on and you were just sharing, that, what you and Darcy's plan is. And I don't know if you want to share that, but, basically that, Darcy she knows how to handle her business too. So if you're in one place, doing what you got to do, that you're not worrying about whether Darcy can handle herself, or, your kids are old enough now that if need be, everybody, who can, knows how to, protect the home. And that just put it in a whole different perspective, for me as to, why would you need multiple weapons, especially if you live in a home with different levels. Something pops off, downstairs, I might not make it upstairs, to get to what I need to
Yeah.
get to. So that's definitely something that I know Wayne and I will have to, discuss as to, what that looks like. I don't know if you wanted to speak to
Yeah, I
that.
think, when it comes to weapons, it should go without saying these are defensive tools, right? I have no interest in going out and being aggressive in any way, except maybe to animals if I need to hunt, right? But that's it. I have hunting weapons, I have self-defense weapons, and in situation dependent, right? The reason they make so many weapons is because, and varieties of weapons, is because some are better than others in certain situations, right? My house is full of sheetrock. It doesn't do very much at all to stop a bullet, but some bullets better than others. Sometimes you want to be able to shoot through a wall. Sometimes you really want that bullet to stop sooner than later. So, I mean, this is a whole can of worms. We talk about weapons and defense. I like non-lethal options as well in certain circumstances, whether that's I've got big cans of bear spray that will just absolutely mess you up from 40 feet away. They will make you a really unhappy camper. If I feel like the threat is a less than lethal sort of situation, that's where I'm going. I don't want to hurt somebody permanently if I don't have to. I don't want to end a life if I don't have to. But if it is a life-threatening situation, I will always have that lethal means of backup
And so,
to not just defend me, but I give my life in a second. I'm not really worried about my life, but my kids and my wife, I'm not playing around.
so as we kind of wrap this up, once again, when it comes to just safety and security, just on an everyday level, not even in a civil unrest, but do I'm talking to everyone else here, is that, make sure that, you discuss, what happens if someone breaks into the house, what do we do? And, I have a funny story just to, once again, of not being prepared. Those of you who know me know that, I am deaf. I have cochlear implants. And so at night I take these off, but I have a bed shaker that if the alarm goes off, it, it shakes the bed and wakes me up so I know what's going on, but I still can't hear. And so I think the alarm had went off one night. I don't know, one of the doors that didn't close all the way. And so the alarm goes off, and Wayne, jumps up, but he's not making sure that, he didn't think to make sure that I was awake and I'm moving too. And I don't know if the bed shaker wasn't working or it did. I'm not quite sure what happened. But, once again, I can't hear. And so if something were to have happened, like say someone was at the door and I didn't get up and put my ears on, somebody could have been down there unaliving him. He's hollering and screaming, and I would have heard nothing because we didn't think about, well, what happens if the bed shaker doesn't work and the alarm goes off? Okay, you need to wake me up so I can be prepared. And then once I got up, I was looking for, used to keep a baseball bat or something behind the bed. I couldn't find the baseball bat and I couldn't hear anything. And I'm like, I was panicking like and so once again, have a plan. We have a plan now. We talked about, okay, if this happens, this is what you do, this is what you do. And so it's really, good to not pleasant things to talk about, but that particular moment right there. And I may have gotten some of the steps mixed up, but that particular moment let us know that we were not prepared if someone were to break in the house and to protect each other, and
Yeah.
so that's the key, is being able to protect what's yours. So as we're going to wrap this up here, if anyone has any questions for Ryan, I'm going to unpin this so I can see see everybody. If you have any questions for Ryan, you can raise your hand. You got Carlos.
Yes. Well, Ambassador Laura, you touched on what I was going to ask as far as we talked about preparation and you talked about protection. That was my question about the protection. We talked, but I guess my question now is, it sounds like we're bunkering in a house and secluding ourselves in the house. What about as far as going outside the house, certain times or certain areas, or things like that, what to watch out for, because if we're in those seem like dire straight times, and of course, people are, like he said, people are looking for what you got. If they ain't got it, I mean, that's even now, without us being in these situations. So what, as far as going out, I don't know about gas. Yeah, I know I don't know, storing gas probably wouldn't be a real good idea, or a certain amount of gas, or where to put it, or whatever the case may be. But for those that may have to go out to get gas or things like that, you got everything else, but then now you got to go outside.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do focus on the hunkering down because I do believe that's probably what most folks are going to need to do, and try to prepare to do. I do like storing gas. I mentioned earlier I've got about 40 gallons stored myself. I want to not have to go get it if I can help it, right? But that's a very good case in point. If time goes by and they've got some gas to go get and I'm running low, may need to go get it. Don't go alone. Go in groups, and there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that can be said from basic, self-defense or self-protective measures that you would want to just simply apply here. Go in the daylight whenever possible. Don't go alone. Walk with a posture that says, "Don't mess with me." You don't have to go around scowling at everybody, but don't look like a victim when you're walking around out there. If I carry a weapon often, I always concealed carry. I think that I don't want extra eyes on me. I don't want people looking at my gun and going, "I'd like to have that," especially in these kind of situations. So I'm going to concealed carry. I'm going to look like I'm not a threat, but I'm also going to look like I'm not to be messed with. So take all these things into consideration. The more folks you can band up with and look like, it's not unlike an animal, right? Like when I do a lot of hiking around here, a mountain lion is not going to mess with me when I'm hiking in a group and when I'm looking big, right? And people are the same. If you look like you are not to be trifled with, they're going to go find somebody that's an easier mark. So, but you can end up having to do what you got to do. My hope is that you're going out as little as possible and going out for things like medicines that you just couldn't store because you're otherwise squared away, and you're doing all you can. It's a good question, Carlos.
Anyone else?
Ambassador Laura, I got one more question.
Mhm.
Now, I know we talk about a lit area, like lighting is good for security and things like that. Now, in this case, would lighting still be a good idea?
That's another good question, and it really becomes situationally dependent, right? Because if everybody's not lit and you're the one that's lit, you're like this beacon. You're like, oh, those people have it together. Like there's something going on there. You stick out like a sore thumb, and you could then become a target. So yeah, if everybody else is dark, I'm probably going to want to fit in with everybody else and be not be showing like all the lights are on too, as much as possible. So I like good dark window coverings that will keep things tampered down. Exterior lighting, I would probably also sacrifice exterior lighting, keep that off if everybody else is dark too. You just don't want to stick out. I think that's more key than having some kind of perimeter secure, unless you've got the whole crew and everybody's set up a perimeter and all that kind of, like a perimeter defense, like you're rolling in like a forward operating base or something like that. Now, the best thing to do is just be unnoticeable.
Miss Margaret?
I wanted to speak on water storage. I think one thing that we all could do would be to collect rainwater. They have the rainwater tanks that you can collect from your gutter system on your home, and let that water be used to either water your garden, or if your facilities are interrupted and you need to flush your commode, you could always use that rainwater to take care of that sanitation problem. Just a thought.
That's a great thought. I love water collection systems. Even if you had enough land to build a small pond or whatever, I have a pool at my house, right? And it's got a bunch of chemicals in it. But one of the things I'm considering to do is get a still, right? Not so much for making booze, but for distilling the water that might come my way as well. Yeah, water collection systems for rainwater. You do have to be a little careful depending on where you are. There are some communities here that, God bless them, I don't know why they would do this, but they make it illegal to collect your rainwater. So check your local ordinances. I'm not telling you what to do or not to do, but just be aware that it could be an issue for you. I
And
hate that that's an issue.
and another thing that when it comes to storing things, our daughter and our son-in-law, they live in Texas, and they were there maybe a couple of years ago when that big storm came and all the power was out and it snowed there. And what they did was went out and gathered snow and filled their tubs and stuff up to be able to flush the toilet and things like that. So, if you live in areas where there is a snowstorm or things like that, snow is a good thing to collect because it turns into, water that you can use for, bathing or, simply something that's flushing the toilet,
Yeah.
and once again, just having those plans, because as I said earlier at the beginning, 2 inches of snow in Utah, it's like, okay, who cares? But it was in 2017, we had maybe 2 or 3 inches of snow, and it made it shut everything down from here to Atlanta. I mean, kids had to stay in school overnight because the buses couldn't get to them. Loss of power. People were leaving their cars on the side of the road because they were stuck on the highway for 24, 48 hours because, Southerners, we don't know how to do snow.
Oh.
And, we don't have the snow piles and things like that. And I remember because, Wayne ended up having to ditch his car and, walk home. I don't know how far it was, but it was far enough. And, once again, that was just another thing where we just didn't think about, okay, what happens if something like this happens? We need to stay in contact with each other. And our pastor was really good. He sent out a group chat, checking on everybody check in. So that was great. And I'm not going to tease Wayne about not being the only one who didn't check in with everybody. So we didn't know where he was at, but we're not going to talk about that. But we do need to make sure that we have, plans for things like that, because something as simple as 2 or 3 inches of snow for here, us in the South, it could just mess us up. In Utah, I remember when I first moved there and it snowed, I was waiting for the phone call to tell me I didn't have to go to work because that's what happens in the South. It snows, you ain't got to go nowhere. And nobody called them and I got to go to work. And
Get to work.
so there's different depending on where you are. So you have to be mindful, of the different preparations that you have to make with
And
that.
I would add too on the water storage. Like most people that have homes already have some water storage. They don't realize you got a hot water heater, right? So it may be 40 gallons just sitting there. Now, if they shut the water off or it's not where they can't bring water in, it's just sitting there. And you may not have water pressure to push it into your pipes, but you can go drain your water heater into another receptacle and you've got 40 gallons of water there if you have a hot water heater that works that way. So again, think outside the box. Don't forget you've got some water storage right now, most likely.
Okay. That wasn't something that I was aware of. Carlos?
Yeah, my final question. He may have talked about it already, but I was I had to do something else. Did he talk about the car things we should have in our cars in case?
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So I generally like a good emergency kit, mostly medical stuff. I do because I've done some real backwoods driving. I like to keep some small amount of emergency food and extra water in my car. So I've got a first aid kit, some food, water, emergency blanket, that sort of thing. But that's just for just getting around. If there's a real disaster, I don't expect you to have everything in your car that you would need, right? So that's where you talk about putting a bug out bag together, something that you can just grab and go if you're going to head for the hills or whatever your disaster bug out plan is. Have things relatively ready to go. I don't have a bug out bag, but I've got a box of food and I've got my backpacking gear. I know the few things that I'm going to go grab, toss in the car, and then we're heading out. But that would be added to my, again, I think every car, no matter what, should have a first aid kit and some kind of emergency roadside, stuffs, and not a bad idea at all to have just a little bit of emergency food and maybe even just a gallon of water. It's taking up space. We talked about space issues before, but if you've got a trunk and you can just take a corner of your trunk and say, this is my emergency corner of the trunk, you're good to go.
Yeah, that was a good question, Carlos. And I had it on my list. I skipped over it, but thank you for bringing that up because once again, I'm thinking about, the snowstorm here and people were on the highway and they couldn't, go anywhere. And I was just reading stories of, once again, sometimes disasters bring out the best in people. So people were, letting people into their cars and they had food and things like that. But, definitely, want to start thinking about, what if you're stuck in your car, not so much a big national disaster, but, you're stuck in your car and, traffic jams happen. We read stories where, traffic's backed up and people haven't moved in 24, 48 hours because of, something that has happened. And, I think I ended up buying some of those little thermal foil blankets and things like that. They don't take up a lot of space. And so I'm just trying to think of, things that I can keep in the car, like I said, water, with the freeze dried food, last 25 years. Okay, I didn't know that. And so I'm gonna start looking into, okay, what are some things that I can keep in the car in case we're ever on the road? We travel, we drive a lot, but we're in a situation where we're stuck in the car for, more than 12 or 14 hours. I would hate that, but I would be prepared, at least to manage that. So that's a very good thought. I'm thinking about, we have a granddaughter going off to college and to, maybe make sure that she has something, in her car, that if something happens along the way that, she can manage or whatever. That's a good question, Carlos. Thank you for bringing that up.
One other thought on the card of something to have in it is something you already have in it: gas. Don't take your car down to empty. Don't take it down to a quarter, right? If you start approaching past half tank of gas, go ahead and fill up so that you always have the gas. You're not walking away from your car because it ran out of gas. And also, if the disaster strikes and you don't have extra jerry cans of gas in your garage, you've got a car that you could siphon gas out of as a fuel source, right? So you have gas in your car, make sure you have gas in your car.
Okay, that's a good, especially for those of us with multiple vehicles, I guess just make sure all of them stay on full.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to think about with the gas prices, but in the long term, it makes sense that,
Yeah,
just keep everything on full when you can. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Ryan, if you have any last words that you want to give us before we wrap it up, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's been informative for me. I can say that I've taken quite a few notes, and I see that I still have some work cut out for me. One of the things that I want you guys to think about from this point on is, what is your 30, 60, 90-day plan? I am working on some information pack that I am going to be sending all of you guys who are on here through the Eventbrite email. One thing is 311 emergency preparation tips. And another thing that I may or may not get done because it's kind of overlapping, like 52 weeks of emergency preparedness type things. And so, you guys may be receiving those things in your email. Give me 48 hours or so to kind of get everything together, but it's really informative stuff that some stuff you may do, some stuff you may not do. But once again, when you talk about 311 items, you're going to find something in there that you can do. But really, I think one of the big things to take away is, start somewhere. What's your 30-day plan? And from there, what's your 60-day plan? And what's your 90-day plan? So, Ryan, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to foot stomp what you just said. Start somewhere, right? I mentioned before, this can all get overwhelming. I'm not asking folks to go dig underground bunkers and fill them up with stuff, you know. Just start with some water storage, you know, and take it from there. And I'll tell you too, it just doesn't have to be into this conversation. I kind of geek out over this. I could talk about it for a week. I don't mind talking about it some more with anybody that's interested. If you have questions, you want to contact me on the side, you can find me on social media. I'll make sure that Laura has my my contact info if you want to shoot me an email or just an instant message. Be happy to chat with you more if you've got more questions.
Okay. Well, with that being said, thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you
Pleasure.
so much. And once again, if anyone wants to contact Ryan outside of here, just let me know and I'll tell you where to find him on Facebook or email or whatever. And so once again, if something that you think of as you're preparing things and you want to ask Ryan, maybe we'll get him a Facebook page that says Ask Ryan.
Yeah, there you go. Nothing's off the table. I appreciate you all. I appreciate everybody's interest and hope you all take care.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate you. And like I said, we'll be in town in July. So maybe we'll be able to see you and Darcy for a little bit. We'll see what our schedule looks like there.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. It was great. Thank you.
For the information.